Tupac, don't start that blasphemy.
Remember what my pops told me.
The new word. Follow me.
Remember what my pops told me. My family tree consists of drug dealers, thugs, and killers. Struggling, known to hustle, screaming, fuck they feelings. I got advice from my father.
How's this for culture?
This is some wonderful kind. You tuned in to a wonderful mind. Hey. Used to be one of the blind. I shed light when they don't want it to shine. No, time to build up. My people getting meals till they filled up. Steal us against the world. Time has to heal us. Ones in control, same ones that imitate us. Minds can't shield us. Laws can't repeal us. Catch you on the road with a tent, they can seal us. Only let music out from hoes or they drill us. People lost at home, you talking about the real us. Penny colored natives, take a look. Yeah, that's still us. I give it to you, wish you killed touch. Yeah, I'm old for a quarter, but I still clutch. Real hush when I get it in, piling the dividends. End goal is an island like Billy King. Violence we living in, change your target. Only need real warriors, the same as Sparta. Wanna change for starters? Well, we late to the fact that we been in the war. We just late to react. This is some wonderful kind. You tuned in to a wonderful mind. Hey. Used to be one of the blind. I shed light where they don't want it to shine. No. This is some wonderful kind. You tuned in to a wonderful mind. Hey. Used to be one of the blind. I shed light where they don't want it to shine. Oh. Hey. Yeah, like that. The goon who sat by the door. King shit, nigga. Yeah.
I thought for a good while how I would start this part 2, but what better place in the high level of consciousness or next level genius of the natives of this land? Turtle Island, the name given to North America by the natives. Most of us are familiar with the creation story of Adam and Eve, but here's the creation story of the natives. Long ago, on the island in the sky where the sky people lived, and they were happy because no one ever died or was born. One day, one of the sky women found out she was giving birth to twins, and she told her husband, and he flew into a rage. There was a tree in the center of the island that gave light to the island since the sun wasn't created yet. He tore up this tree and left a hole. Curiously, she peeked over and she could see the face of the water on the earth. Just then, he pushed her in, and she began falling toward the face of the earth. There were animals on the earth, and far below, a few birds saw her falling toward the earth and wanted to save her. So just before she hit the water, they caught her on their backs, brought her to the other animals, and each of them took turns diving into the ocean trying to get mud from the bottom. One after another, they tried and they failed. Finally, a little toad tried, and when he resurfaced, his mouth was full of mud. The animals took it and spread it across the back of a large turtle. The mud began to grow and grow until it became the size of what we call North America. The woman stepped onto the land and sprinkled dust into the air and created the stars. Then she created the moon and the sun. Then the sky woman gave birth to twins. Named one sapling, and he grew to be kind and gentle. She named the other Flint, and he was as cold as his name. They quickly grew and began filling the earth with their creations. Sapling created what was good and useful to humans. He made rivers that flowed two ways, and in them he put fish with no bones. He made plants that were perfectly edible. He had been able to do all the work himself. There would be no suffering. Flint destroyed much of Sapling's work and created what was bad. He put rivers that flowed one direction, put bones in fish, put thorns on berry bushes. He created winter. But since Sapling created life, it had to make way for spring. Flint created monsters that Sapling drove deep into the earth. Eventually, they knew they had to fight till one of them was defeated. For a while, neither of them was winning, but eventually Sapling won. Since Flint was a deity, he could not die, so he was forced to live on the turtle's back. And every now and then you could hear his anger and feel it when a volcano erupts.
Whether it was the Iroquois in New York or the Sioux in North Dakota, the Ojibwe here in Wisconsin, they all used the turtle. It was a real significant part of their life. This one here I'm going to show you, this is a red ear slider, and it doesn't matter if it was a snapping turtle or a painted turtle, a map turtle, they're all the same. This was used as a calendar by the Indians, and I'll show you how. There's 13 moons in a calendar year, and every turtle has 13 sections in its back. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. One for each of the moons, and it starts over here and goes counterclockwise around and then down. There's 28 days between each moon, and every turtle has 28 smaller sections around the base of it. And if you times that, that comes to 364 days. That's obviously one day short of
North America looks like a turtle. Mexico down to Panama is the tail. Florida is one back leg. Baja California is the other back leg. The front leg is Alaska, and the other front leg is up near Labrador. And it's interesting that you would have a creation story and a recognition that North America looked like that without satellites in those days.
Some historians believe April Fool's Day started in the 1500s. Yeah, that's when European countries began using the Gregorian calendar instead of the Julian calendar. The Gregorian calendar moved New Year's Day from April 1st to January 1st, but not everyone got the message. Those who continued to celebrate on April 1st were called April Fools and had pranks played on them. Others believe the day is celebrated in honor of Mother Nature and the tricks she plays with unpredictable weather around this time.
Trespassers in the house of the king. Answer my riddle or cease to be.
Go on. I'm waiting.
I never was. Am always to be. No one ever saw me, nor ever will. And yet I am the confidence of all who live and breathe. What am I?
Order. You are order. I never doubted you.
Incorrect.
Try again. Please. That was a completely suitable answer. You are purity.
Wrong again.
What? Never was. Always to be. In the future. Non-existent. Imaginary. Yet it exists and never was. Always to be. Yet I'm the confidence of all who live and breathe.
Mortals live and breathe. Maybe stop thinking like a god.
Then I might as well stop thinking. Wait, I have it! You are tomorrow!
Bother.
A question that often arises is, what happened to the remains of these giants mentioned in the scriptures? Are there concrete archaeological evidences that can prove the existence of these creatures, known as Nephilim, mentioned in the Bible? In the book of Genesis, the Nephilim are described as powerful beings, the heroes of old, men of renown. The idea of giants walking among humans has been a source of fascination and speculation for millennia. But are there tangible proofs of their existence? There are reports of a giant human skeleton found in Saudi Arabia by an oil company, supposedly kept secret by the Saudi government. This report on the giant corroborates stories found in both the Torah and the Quran. For those who don't know, the Quran also mentions giants, including Og, the king of Bashan, who was supposedly around 15 feet 5 inches tall. Another example of a discovery widely suppressed at the time is the case of gigantic sarcophagi from ancient Egypt found in Saqqara. These sarcophagi are about 13 feet long and 6.5 feet wide, with the coffin itself weighing approximately 70 tons and the lid adding another 30 tons, all made of stone. Especially the most famous of them, the giant Goliath. The famous Cetacea giants, also known as Saiduka, are mentioned by Native Americans in North America. The remains, the bones of the Cetacea or Saiduka, belong to a legendary tribe of giants, considered by the indigenous people to be cannibals with red hair and very fair skin. Native accounts describe these giants as having white skin and red hair. In 1911, guano miners discovered the remains of these giants in Lovelock Cave, Nevada. In the autumn of 1911, James H. Hart, one of the early miners to explore the cave, reported finding an impressive mummified body of a man, measuring 6 feet 6 inches tall, with distinctly red hair, at approximately 4 feet deep in the central north part of the cave. Unfortunately, during the first year of excavations, some human remains and artifacts were lost or destroyed. The best preserved adult mummy was boiled and destroyed by a local fraternal lodge seeking the skeleton for initiation
Lovelock,
rituals.
Nevada, 1911. Inside a narrow cave, 2 miners are searching for bat guano, a key ingredient in making fertilizer. But as they head deeper into the darkness, they make an unexpected discovery. They find more than 40 human skeletons, some of which are abnormally large.
In 1911, giant bones were found in Lovelock Cave. Large human skulls and skeletons that measured between 7 and 8 feet in height, which for ancient man would have been rather significant.
This caused a sensation, and one of the strange things about the discoveries in Lovelock Cave is that the skeletons were often found with red hair. And so it does seem like they were a different kind of people than the Native Americans from the area.
Although many of the large bones found in Lovelock Cave were unfortunately lost to time, for decades, a number of skulls were preserved at a local museum.
Until about 10 years ago, there were 4 very large skulls on display inside the museum. These were then removed and ceremonially buried. What's also interesting is that over 100,000 artifacts were excavated from Lovelock Cave. The strange thing is that many of the artifacts were huge. Like you have giant-sized sandals, like a 15-inch long shoe, which is size 29 US, which would fit someone who's about 9 feet tall. And even pieces of clothing, which were so big, it looked as though they were worn by giants.
The idea that giant bones were actually found in a cave in Nevada may sound far-fetched to some. But the truth is that there were many such discoveries reported during the Wild West.
In the southwestern United States, there's several very strange stories of these dead corpses or skeletons being found regularly. In terms of the reports of giants, this is a compelling motif. People were fascinated by this idea of a giant race that had lived here previously. And this connects to a lot of biblical belief that tended to be fairly literal back in the day. And the Bible talks about back when there was a race of giants that lived among the earth. And so for many people in the Wild West, when you see some skeletons dug out of the earth that seem to corroborate this, this was an affirmation of literal biblical beliefs as well.
Is it really possible that a race of giants once inhabited the Old West, as the numerous discoveries reported throughout the 1800s suggest?
There are a few very old buildings still standing that it's not a stretch to wonder, were they created by a civilization prior to ours? With such tall doorways and ceilings, who were they made for? Who were they made by? To make a building 2 or 3 times bigger than it needs to be, not only would take 2 or 3 times more work, it's just not logical or practical. Throughout history, whether it be movies, books, or just old folk tales, giants have always been prevalent within our culture. Then there are the very large skeletons that have been discovered and then promptly thrown into the sea by the Smithsonian. Large swords, instruments, guns, books have all been discovered over time, only to be dismissed or hidden away. The Bible makes numerous mentions of the Nephilim, fallen angels that mated with men. Other terms associated with the giants are Anunnaki or Tartarians. Big part of what makes such places like Stonehenge and the pyramids so mysterious to us is that would require superhuman feats to have accomplished. It was not beyond reason to conclude that there were beings that existed that aided mankind with structures and technology. It certainly is beyond reason to conclude that the remains of such beings have been strategically hidden or discarded. Numerous articles and reports, especially in the early 1900s, make specific and detailed claims of skeletons that have been found, often in the southwest area of the U.S. In 1095 AD, Pope Urban II made a speech that galvanized the good Christians of Europe to go crusade and conquer the Holy Lands. Reason for these crusades has long been accepted quote-unquote fact of religious fighting between the Christians and the Muslims over control of the Holy Land.
Philip Augustus of France gathered armies and set off toward the Holy Land to reconquer Jerusalem. Turkish armies challenged Frederick along the way. Many of the soldiers starved, and Frederick himself drowned in a river. Philip and Richard reached Acre in 1191, and after nearly a 2-year siege, the Muslims in the town surrendered to the Crusaders. Philip got sick and returned to France, leaving Richard in charge of the remaining soldiers in Acre. In the year 1200, Pope Innocent III called for a 4th crusade, but his strategy was to conquer Egypt in the interest of providing a closer launching point for future campaigns to retake Jerusalem.
This agreed upon academic deception is deep because, again, historically, this area in Africa was known as Kemet, and we do know that that was not Jerusalem until 1948. The Hebrew biblical name for Egypt is Mizraim. The definition of Mizraim is mounds or fortress. Often in biblical times, in times of famine, people went to Egypt because it was known to be a plentiful land. Does the desert look like a plentiful land? Also important to re-mention, the great river in the Bible is the Euphrates. It's said to have 7 streams branching off of it. The modern Euphrates or the Nile do not. Oh, and as I mentioned in part 1, the Bible mentions corn 94 times. The states of Iowa and Nebraska completely outproduce the entire continent of Africa in corn production.
Story intertwines with various elements of European history, religious lore, and conspiracy theories, making it a fascinating topic for exploration. Origin and early history. The Priory of Zion was allegedly founded in 1099, a secretive organization with connections to the Knights Templar. Its purported purpose was to safeguard the descendants of the Merovingian dynasty, a Frankish royal line. The priory, according to some accounts, was deeply involved in the spiritual and political machinations of medieval Europe. The Merovingian connection. Central to the priory's legend is its association with the Merovingian dynasty. A monastic military order formed in the 12th century are often linked with the priory. They were prominent in the Crusades and are speculated to have discovered sacred relics and secrets during their time in the Holy Land.
Powerful biblical artifacts like the Ark of the Covenant are believed by some like myself to have been located in America and confiscated by the Templars during their unholy crusade. Theirs was an order shrouded in violence and secrecy, masking as warriors protecting Christianity. In reality, they were the priory's personal mercenaries in search of biblical artifacts.
Templar defended the Holy Land. Their tools were bloodshed and prayer. Founded in the 12th century, these Christian warrior monks were an unbeatable force for nearly 200 years. Then they suffered a spectacular fall from grace. Tried for heresy, they were accused of practicing strange rituals. Accusers said they spat on the cross, worshipped the severed human head, and engaged in perverse sexual acts. They were disbanded. Their Grand Master was burned at the stake. Ever since, their name has carried an air of mystery and romance.
It's believed that several of the tribes up and down the pre-Columbus Northeast recognized the red cross that is a staple of the Templars' war flag is identical. So when they saw this on ships approaching, their guards were down. One not-so-quiet secret is how the Templars were in America, but said to be in the Holy Land. Yeah, you know that America that Columbus is credited with discovering 200 years later?
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
In 1994, Japanese scientist Dr. Masaru Emoto was curious if water's molecular structure changed, so he froze tap water and some water from a local spring and examined it under a microscope. What he learned is that both sources of water form their own unique shapes under the microscope. He was curious as to what was the cause, since both of them came from different sources. So he began exposing the water to different music and emotions and words. He was stunned to learn that every time the water was exposed to something positive, it formed unique crystal-like shapes. The water that came from murky or polluted sources or was exposed to negativity was forming ugly yet unique shapes. It was seeming as though Water was reacting based on what it was exposed to, which prompted Dr. Emoto to start varying the emotions that he exposed to the water. These images are some of his fascinating results. Now, once you think about it, we humans are 70% water, the earth is 70% water, and a flat earther like myself believes the sky is 70% water as well, but that's a topic for another day. Dr. Emoto's experiments was rediscovering was not original to him though. There were older civilizations that had such high level understanding of the importance of harmony that they were somehow able to cut shapes into the land that allowed water to flow in almost identical shapes that the water formed under a microscope. Star forces, they are called, are located all around the world, but are almost never spoke of, surely not in a way that addresses or assesses their true nature and reason.
But Atlantis wasn't just a city or even just an island. It was a civilization that spanned the globe. And each city was connected using transportation technology that again sounded like magic. The story became almost overwhelming. Almost. The brothers said that ancient relics of Atlantis still exist, and they still possess their power. The power to travel great distances, the power of communication, the power to heal, perhaps even the secret to immortality. And the knights played the role of courageous warrior monks, protecting Christians making the long pilgrimage to the Holy Land. But while some Knights Templar guarded Jerusalem, other knights were digging beneath it. Day and night they dug, until one day they struck gold. Literally. The Brothers of the East were right. They promised the Knights Templar that if they dug under the Temple Mount, they would find artifacts that once belonged to the great civilization of Atlantis.
Now, one important figure in the Bible, but also in the origins of Freemasonry, was Solomon. Well, not so much Solomon, but Solomon's tomb. This was an elaborate structure that was meant to hold the Ark of the Covenant and other Hebrew artifacts. Solomon, known as the wisest king, although did not build this building, he enlisted the help of Hiram, king of Tyre. He is credited in a lot of Freemason lore as the architect of Freemasonry.
It's all sorts of artifacts, artworks, and precious objects from the Holy Land, and were even rumored to have found items like the Holy Menorah, Ark of the Covenant, and the Holy Grail while tunneling. Forced disbandment. In 1312, their riches and treasures were never recovered, and hundreds of monks were never accounted for or heard from again.
Ancient Mystic Oriental Freemasonry, a book originally published in 1907, considered by many to be the Bible of Freemasonry. Some ask why I would post or read out of a Freemasonry book, but sometimes you have to study all sides and the truth can be hidden within enemy lines. I posted more of the book, so pause and read as you see fit, but I'm reading from page 25. The cradle of symbolism used in all masonry is placed by many of the best authorities in that country which they believe was first inhabited, i.e. the plateau of Tartary, and from there transmitted to this generation by the sages of India, Persia, Ethiopia, and Egypt. We are not indebted to ancient Egypt for either religion or masonry, but to America. It is a fact that in Memphis, Egypt, in the pyramids, under the guidance of the kings, the mystic rites of Freemasonry were worked many thousands of years ago. But at that time, the continent of America and Egypt were one and the same. Historically known as Palestine, this takeover, which has resulted in ongoing conflict to this day, was the brainchild of the United States government and Zionists. Zionism, the brainchild of self-proclaimed atheist Theodore Herzl, was the philosophy turned political party that the Ashkenazi, a sect of Europeans that did not want to be Muslim or Christian and chose the Judaic religion, known to handle small trinkets of metal and jewelry, were indeed a people. Herzl presented his case to the First Zionist Congress in 1898 that the Ashkenazis were indeed a people, and not just a people, but God-chosen people, and were entitled to a land of their own. So in 1948,
Floyd Anderson was one of them. We had several other people in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied, but it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done.
Could you tell us that they were worried about war with the Arabs?
Anti-Semitic beliefs. I cannot be anti-Semitic if I know where I come from.
Anti-Semitic beliefs. I cannot be anti-Semitic if I know where I come from.
Seventh Crusade, 1248 to 1254, was the first of the two crusades led by Louis IX of France. Also known as the Crusade of Louis IX to the Holy Land, its objective was to reclaim the Holy Land by attacking Egypt, the main seat of Muslim power in the Middle East, then under as Salih Ayyub, son of Al-Kamil. The crusade was conducted in response to setbacks in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, beginning with the loss of the Holy City in 1244, and was preached by Innocent IV in conjunction with a crusade against Emperor Frederick II, the Prussian Crusades, and Mongol incursions. At the end of 1244, Louis was stricken with a severe malarial infection, and he vowed that if he recovered he would set out for a crusade. His life was spared, and as soon as his health permitted him, he took the cross and immediately began preparations. The next year, the Pope presided over the First Council of Lyon, directing a new crusade under the command of Louis.
Herodotus, or Hero.us, lived thousands of years after the supposed construction of the pyramids, but he's the only one that documented their construction. The Bible makes no mention of the pyramids. None of the regional maps of Herodotus' time shows the pyramids. Most importantly, no one raided them or thought to study the pyramids. Out of all the crusades to the Holy Land and to Egypt, the crusades occurred over a 700-year period. All of Europe was vying to get into Egypt, but Herodotus is the only person of his time to make mention of them, and no one else mentioned or was able to decipher them until the French came along 700 years later. That's why Herodotus is known as the father of history and the father of lies. I mean, call me Captain Obvious, but no one Egyptian gives us a documentation of the creation of the pyramids. It had to come from one Greek man, Hero.us.
May 1798. A massive French invasion force sails across the Mediterranean. 55,000 men aboard more than 300 ships, escorted by 13 ships of the line.
Okay, just so I'm clear, 55,000 men on more than 300 battleships plus 13 escorts going to a secret location across the Mediterranean.
Aboard the most powerful of these, the 120-gun L'Orient, sails General Napoleon Bonaparte. France's celebrated hero of the war in Italy has received new orders from his government. He is to lead an expeditionary force east to Egypt.
So never mind the quote-unquote West Indies, they were heading east.
And to all educated Europeans, an ancient land of mystery and wonder.
At the head of an army of 40,000 men, Napoleon Bonaparte embarks on the conquest of Egypt. Certain of victory, Bonaparte takes along 167 scholars from all disciplines, whose mission is to support the military campaign and to study all aspects of Egypt with a view to a lasting occupation. But while the French army earns an important victory over the Mamelukes at the Battle of the Pyramids, its fleet is destroyed by the English. With no way to return, Bonaparte is now a prisoner of his own conquest.
Okay, according to his story, he was stuck in Egypt, but all of his family was in America. And that's where Napoleon tried to flee to after Waterloo. The entire Bonaparte family was deeply rooted in America.
Napoleon is thrilled by the expedition, which he has done much to promote and organize himself. It is a chance to win fresh glory.
It's no wonder there are people that question if he existed. He was planning in Haiti, America, and Egypt at the same time.
And his squadron of 14 ships of the line now prowl the Mediterranean. Nelson knows a large French fleet has just left Toulon, but does not know its destination, which remains a closely guarded secret. Undetected, the French expedition sails south.
The Mediterranean is basically all of Europe's backyard, but 300 ships, undetected?
Neither side is even aware of the other's presence.
Now mind you, Napoleon went through great extremes to keep his intended destination a secret. This has always been Kemet, not Egypt.
He is France's first black general, born in what's now Haiti, to a French aristocrat and enslaved African woman.
Dumas was also said to be of vital importance, helping the French navigate the waters to Egypt.
Austrians had nicknamed him the Black Devil.
Now remember, around 500 years prior, King Louis IX led two different unsuccessful invasions into Egypt. So Napoleon conquering Egypt was in ways retribution for their king. Why is there no place in North Africa named after anyone French? Clearly, they were paying tribute in multiple cities and states in America to their king and to their nation, but no place in North Africa.
It must be too sad.
On the 22nd of August 1791, slaves in the French colony of Saint-Domingue on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola began the Haitian Revolution. Christopher Columbus landed on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola during his first transatlantic voyage in 1492, and the island and its population were soon exploited for their gold. However, by the 17th century, Spanish interest in the island had waned, and French settlers soon rose to dominance with the creation of large sugar plantations.
Key point, harvesting coffee and sugar was one of the main reasons of slavery, and America was known to have meat.
By the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789, the plantations on Saint-Domingue were producing 60% of the world's coffee and 40% of all the sugar imported by Britain and France. The French National Assembly abolished slavery, although Napoleon later attempted to reintroduce it to the colonies. He failed to do so in Saint-Domingue, which declared independence on the 1st of January 1804 under the name Haiti, making it the first country to be established by former slaves.
Now, as stated in part 1, the French were having their own internal turmoil with the French Revolution, and they were losing their grip in Haiti due to the Haitian Revolution. A few years prior, they reacquired the Louisiana territory from Spain, but they were about to sell it. I thought they were in Egypt. Spanish, French, and English often used the natives to do their bidding against each other. The natives were under constant attack, while they simply just did business deals with each other. All of Europe had eyes set on America, also known as Old World Egypt. Most modern Egyptologists date the construction of the pyramids at about 3,500 to 4,500 years ago. This led me to start looking at old maps. One of the oldest maps I came across was published in 1554, a fairly detailed map showing temples and other significant buildings, but major omissions. There was no pyramids. So I say, maybe he just made an oversight. So I started digging into other maps, 1584. Still, there were no pyramids. This is starting to make me curious to say who was documenting these areas, because they would make very detailed descriptions about everything else, but still no pyramids. They did not start appearing on maps until the late 1700s. Around the same time, the French and the British were invading America. And remember, there were multiple crusades to Egypt and the Holy Land, but no one mentioned, documented, or even raided these pyramids over the 600 years.
In 1799, the Rosetta Stone is one of history's most important artifacts. It features 3 different scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. This stone, containing the same text in all 3 scripts, was key to deciphering hieroglyphs. French linguist Jean-François Champollion deciphered the hieroglyphs in 1822 by reading the Greek text. This discovery greatly contributed to our understanding of ancient Egyptian history and culture.
No coincidence, the Rosetta Stone was discovered at the same time Napoleon was invading America. King Tut tomb was discovered in 1922 by the Britishmen. So none of the crusaders and invaders over the 800 years made these discoveries. None of the locals. Ironically, only the 2 countries that invaded America are our primary Egyptologists. Just about everything we think we know about Egypt has come from the French or the British. But hey, they wouldn't lie, would they?
Whatever, man. Hey, you ready to get this message on? Whatever, man.
Why is 90% of the Grand Canyon off limits?
Anyone that wants to can tour or even fly over the pyramids at Giza. The locals don't view them as sacred grounds or structures. For them, they bring tourists, and tourists bring money. The Grand Canyon, on the other hand, will require real climbing experience and equipment in some places, or just isn't accessible, but mostly is federally protected with real no-fly zones, meaning they will shoot your ass down no-fly zones. Now, just recently,
we have an update about Arizona's largest national park. It is now closed to visitors. The National Park Service announced that the Grand Canyon will be closed until further notice.
The canyon has always been sacred ground to the natives and an area of great mystery. Most of the high peaks are named after Egyptian gods, and they are not random structures of nature as scientists and archaeologists of today would try to have us believe, but the peaks actually align with the constellations. In other words, they were built. Now by whom and when and for what are the questions. In the early 1900s, two men became prominent for their explorations of the canyon. One was G.E. Kincaid.
The main passageway is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to 9 feet toward the farther end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first side passages branch off to the right and left, along which on both sides are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms of today, though some are 30 by 40 feet square. These are entered by oval-shaped doors and are ventilated by round air spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled or hewn as straight as could be laid out by an engineer. The ceilings of many of the rooms converge to a center. The side passages near the entrance run at a sharp angle from the main hall, but toward the rear they gradually reach a right angle in direction. Here are found tools of all descriptions made of copper. These people undoubtedly knew the lost art of hardening this metal, which has been sought by chemicals for centuries without result. On a bench running around the workroom was some charcoal and other material probably used in the process. There's also slag and stuff similar to matte, showing that these ancients smelted ores, but so far no trace of where or how this was done has been discovered, nor the origin of the ore.
The crypt had shelf upon shelf and row upon row of mummies. Dozens of the Smithsonian agreed. A few weeks later, Professor S.A. Jordan arrived with a team of about 40 scientists, researchers, and laborers to excavate.
Over 100 feet from the entrance is the cross hall, several hundred feet long, in which are found the idol or image of the people's god sitting cross-legged with a lotus flower or lily in each hand.
Lotus flower, a significant symbol known in ancient Egypt and Asia.
Some of the mummies are covered with clay and all are wrapped in a bark fabric. The urns or cups on the lower tiers are crude, while as the higher shelves are reached, the urns are finer in design, showing a later stage of civilization. It is worthy of note that all the mummies examined so far have proved to be male, no children or females being buried here. This leads to the belief that this exterior section was the warriors' barracks.
John Powell, the other documented explorer.
The following year, he rode the length of the Mississippi River. But when the Civil War broke out in 1861, Powell felt compelled to enlist in the Union Army. Amid the chaos and carnage of the Battle of Shiloh, he was shot in the arm, a wound that resulted in amputation. But that did not stop Powell from following his true calling, exploration. In 1869, he struck out on a dangerous and historic expedition of the Colorado River. Despite losing a boat and a supply of scientific equipment at the aptly dubbed Disaster Falls, Powell made it to the Grand Canyon in August 1869. A mile deep, 18 miles wide, and 227 miles long, this ancient rock formation was considered impossible to pass. But Powell struggled on, even when some of his crew refused. After long and arduous weeks, he finally made it out. Meanwhile, newspapers had mistakenly reported that Powell had perished, so his survival and success caused quite a sensation. As a result, Congress granted funding for a second expedition. It produced some of the most reliable maps of the Colorado River at the time.
After Powell's expedition, he brought the Smithsonian back with him, and Powell is known to have found pyramids and mummies within the Grand Canyon. So, needless to say, this area was soon after quarantined off. What Powell discovered and documented would literally crumble the academic understanding of the ancient world and bring into major question the cities and origins that we've commonly accepted. It's commonly believed that Powell gave the mostly Egyptian names to the peaks of the canyon, but factually they were named prior to his expedition. 1800s were a fascinating time, not just because of the reconstruction that ended up happening, but the landscape and power-altering struggles and conflicts and wars of the 1800s that destroyed the old world buildings and technology. Wars like the War of 1812 and the French-Indian War, and most prominently, the Civil War.
During the 17th and early 18th century, British colonists face a constant struggle to establish control over the Atlantic coast and create and defend colonial settlements from Georgia to modern-day Maine through diplomacy and armed conflict with Native Americans. At the same time, a smaller number of French colonists carve out a domain amidst the Great Lakes, along the St. Lawrence River, and west of the Appalachian Mountains. By the middle of the 18th century, both sides lay claim to the area surrounding the head of the Ohio River. Soon, open conflict flares into war.
They were always said to be at war with each other, but one thing was for sure, they were at constant war with the natives of this land. This was a most cancerous takeover of land and sea, with foresight to take over mind and body. Also, under the premise of war, a lot of the old world buildings and technology was destroyed in the midst of their takeover. They did have the time to showcase it one last time before their final destruction of these buildings and technology. The World Fairs. The World Fairs were architectural and technological advancements supposedly done in America specifically by new immigrants just 2 years prior to their completion. America at this time was experiencing an influx of European immigrants that were supposed to be the horse and buggy people, who actually created these structures, statues, and technology that was here on display.
After this, the Great Reset, Chicago's World Fair, or the World Columbian Exposition, was held in Chicago. This Pacific World's Fair was facilitated from the 1st of May to the 30th of October 1890. The Chicago World's Fair had over 27 million Americans attend, and it was mainly designed by Daniel Burnham with other architects. The fair was to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus' arrival in the New World in 1492. With a workforce of 10,000 men, they apparently built 200 ornate buildings starting in 1891, lasting 2 years, covering 630 acres. How was it possible for these incredible buildings and statues to be built in such a short time? There was no machinery, no such tools, no electrical diggers in 1891. Not only this, who and where did all these skilled construction workers come from?
The transportation of immigrant orphans to densely populated cities in the Midwest to be housed in orphanages separated by race.
Seem to be mentioned.
The orphan train.
One such event is called the Orphan Train Movement, which was a welfare program that transported over 250,000 children, with claims the number was actually over 540,000 on locomotive carriages from crowded urban areas in the eastern United States to foster homes in the Midwest United States. It was claimed that these infants had been orphaned, abandoned, abused, or homeless, when actually these were new immigrants. So where did all these infants come from?
Hundreds of thousands of now great-grandparents and grandparents indoctrinated with new futures and vague memories of their past. This simultaneously was a time of the most insane asylums being in use in American history.
Asylums were an institution where the mentally ill were held. These facilities witnessed much ineffective and cruel treatment of those who were hospitalized within them. In both Europe and America, these facilities were in need of reform. Patients with severe mental problems, also called lunatics in the medical profession at the time, were routinely subject to brutal techniques such as ice baths and electric shock.
Well, Dr. Plecker was convinced that there was a need to purify the white race. He thought that he was preserving the Commonwealth of Virginia, that he was maintaining the United States of America, and most importantly to him, that he was protecting the white race.
For 34 years, starting in 1912, Dr. Plecker was the director of the state's Bureau of Vital Statistics, carefully compiling birth and death records. Anyone who had one drop of other than white blood was listed as color. They were mongrels, in his view. Plecker was relentless. With great energy, he compiled lists and wrote letters chastising whites who applied for marriage licenses with those Plecker thought were impure.
There's no question that Plecker was incredibly aggressive about using the few prerogatives the law gave him to register people. He used those prerogatives really to threaten people, to coerce them. Dr. Plecker once boasted that he had a list of people by race that rivaled that list that was kept by Hitler of the Jews.
Today, I would like to highlight a complicated and complex moment in Virginia's history, the passage of the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. March 20th, 2024 marks the centennial of the passage of the Racial Integrity Act that was signed into law by Governor Albert Lee Trinkle. In simplistic terms, every individual living in the Commonwealth of Virginia was required to state their race on a registration card that was issued by the Bureau of Vital Statistics. Also, the law stated that there were only two races in Virginia, quote, white or quote, colored. If a person failed to register, they could be charged with a felony and 1 year of confinement in the state penitentiary. Once this legislation was enacted, Dr. Walter Plecker, the director and registrar of the Virginia Bureau of Vital Statistics, used the entire state apparatus to increase the tax on particular communities in Virginia, especially indigenous Virginians. Due to this law, indigenous Virginians were eliminated from written record because they were to be identified as colored instead of as Indian. The act was the beginning of a paper genocide in Virginia. Dr. Plecker sought to enforce the law by circulating a list of surnames to all the Virginia's circuit clerks that supposedly identify what he called, quote, mixed Negroid Virginia families striving to pass as Indian or white in each county. Many of the surnames on this document can be connected to some of Virginia's federally and state recognized tribes today.
And you've never heard of Sarah Rector, who at the age of 12 became a multimillionaire and the richest black child in the world. She became so rich that the Oklahoma legislature petitioned to make her a white person on paper. God forbid a black person ever be wealthy. How does she get this money? She was actually a descendant of Creek Nation Native Americans. And basically after the Civil War, a lot of land which now belongs to present-day Oklahoma, given to descendants of the Creek Nation Native Americans. Sarah was given about 160 acres. Land was considered to be infertile and not suitable for business, and the fertile land was given to white people. Around 1913, Sarah's father leased the land to an oil driller, and what do you know, the land was super fertile for oil, generated about 2,500 barrels a day. She started to receive royalties, which made her a millionaire by the age of 18. The state of Oklahoma tried to make her a white person on paper, or switch her guardianship to a white person, because a black person wasn't suited to guard her. Nonetheless, the amassed way more millions, lived to the age of 65.
I won't tell. I know something I won't tell.
What you know, huh?
Well, it's just that Injun Joe is ticklish.
America became the great nation she is today.
America the beautiful, don't be so cold. How you expecting our seas gon' grow when you trap us in the gun and show love to the other motherfuckers while we right here starving at home? I'd cry if I thought that me shedding a tear might help. But then again, me shedding tears don't help. I wanna call up to the president just to see if he know help. Let him know you up shit creek yourself. We all sinners facing the winter with no socks and no shoes. In a position where we all gon' lose. Instead of penitentiaries, we gon' need more schools. And what the fuck is we gon' do? Sit around and let the world pass us by, waiting on the message for the reverend. And he ain't but another man trying to get to...
I got so many theories and suspicions.
First, View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith.
In it, Ethan argues that ancient Israelites traveled from the Middle East to the Americas, and Native Americans are descendants of these Israelite immigrants. This idea was not exclusive or original to Ethan Smith. A lot of people actually believed this back in the day.
This is their grand deception in a nutshell, since they can't escape the fact that the Native Americans are the descendants of the Hebrews. The reason they can never and will never acknowledge that those same natives are aboriginal to this land, because it will have a smelling salt effect. As of now, as planned, the only people walking around this planet calling themselves a color, black, and there's no black land on the map, and African American, that's 2 continents, and not one nationality, are the very same descendants of the Hebrews that they speak of. We were all brought here via slave trade, so they say. The natives trekked from Syria through Russia, across the Bering Strait, through Alaska into America, so they say. So long as we continue to accept our given history and not operating as a people, a nation, we will be viewed and treated as 3/5 of humans. We will continue to be lost at home, and squatters' rights is real. I promise you they use the pen way more than the gun. The original history of ancient America, founded upon the ruins of antiquity, the identity of the Aborigine.
Language, as uttered by Tecumseh, is not written by the pen of fiction merely to uphold the theory of the brain, but gathered from the archives of a people history to support the theory of an apparent truth. The present writer will not yield in the presence of any man in the belief that the Aborigines of North America, but North America only, and the ancient Israelites are identical.
There are many other old books like these. I'm going to give an example of an account from the 10 tribes of Israel. It's on page 16, and I'll just read it for you here. It says, "The following is from Alexander's Messenger, published many years ago in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." And again, this book was published in 1883, so many years ago from 1883. Anyway, it goes on to say, "A government officer stationed at Lake Superior at an early day, before any white settlers had invaded that part of the country, after becoming acquainted with a number of Indian tribes, found one tribe in possession of a copper tube, tightly soldered. And when asked what it contained, they said they were not able to tell, but they had received it from their ancestors a long time ago. The officer finally prevailed upon them to let him open the article, and when he did so, he found it filled with parchment, with inscriptions that he could not read. But by sending the parchment to Washington City, where it was examined by competent Hebrew scholars, it was declared to be part of the 5 books of Moses. So that's the first 5 books of the Bible.
It was declared to be part of the 5 books of Moses. So that's the first 5 books of the Bible.
Here we have another link in the chain proving that the Hebrews were here many years before the white man came to this continent, and that the present North American Indians are their descendants.
So what you see here, these are called the Newark Holy Stones, and they were found in 1860 at Newark, Ohio, which is only about an hour east of Columbus. They were found in the burial grounds of an ancient mound builder civilization, which the United States calls the Hopewell civilization, who were here from about the 500s BC to about 400 AD. They were found by a man named David Wyrick and about 7 other witnesses. This first stone you're looking at here, this is nicknamed the Decalogue Stone. It was found in November of 1860 in a large burial mound. And the reason why it's called the Decalogue Stone is because it has the entire 10 Commandments inscribed on it in ancient block Hebrew letters. You'll notice there's a person carved here in the middle. He looks like he's wearing a robe and a turban on his head and holding a tablet. The letters above his head say Moshe, which means Moses. As you can see, the inscription of the 10 Commandments is all over the front, sides, and back of the stone. After the stone was discovered, when word got out about it, many people automatically dismissed it as fake because they didn't think it was possible for an ancient Hebrew artifact to be found in a North American burial mound that was a couple thousand years old.
In the late 4th century, Jerome was commissioned by Pope Damasus to revise the Gospels in order to correct errors of the old Latin translation. Jerome continued to revise and translate the Latin Bible, and it became his life's work. Known as the Latin Vulgate, it was the basis for a standard text used by the Western Church for 1,000 years.
But it wasn't until the 13th century that, as a standard, all the books of the Bible were bound in one volume, or that Bibles were mass-produced.
The Latin Vulgate became the primary Bible of the medieval era, used in the liturgy of the church at a time when few people could actually read the Bible.
Don't let this go over your head. They were printing Bibles based on information and text they got in America and based on people that have been in America and still remain in America.
In 1884, John Wycliffe, the first to translate the Bible from Latin to Middle English.
They wanted to keep control of who could read the Bible. So they tried to stop John. And even after he was dead, they dug up his bones and burned them.
In 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the Dum Diversas, in essence authorizing the Portuguese to conquer and enslave all non-Christians.
The very first Bible printed in America. I don't know, most people don't know what Bible that was, but it's the 1663 is the first year a Bible was printed in America. And the guy's name was John Eliot. John Eliot, the apostle to the Indians, he was called. Outside of Harvard University, approximately there outside of Boston, Massachusetts, there's a place called Cambridge, New England at that time, 1663. Well, John Eliot was a missionary to the Indians up there, the Algonquin Indian tribe.
Eliot had a firm grip of the language. He spent the next 14 years translating the entire 66 books of the English Bible, which was really fast. Just for reference, it had taken 44 scholars 7 years to produce the King James Version. Eliot had to become a grammarian and a lexiconographer to create the Algonquian dictionary.
Bullshit.
He was a Puritan missionary with a massive undertaking. His mission was to convert the indigenous Massachusetts tribes to Christianity. Eliot's instrument to do this was through the Christian scriptures, but it was only made possible by the arrival of the printing press. In 1638, the first printing Massachusetts and opened the first American print shop, which would later become the Harvard University Press. Back in England in 1649, Parliament set up a corporation later known simply as the New England Company. The corporation collected money for missionary purposes in America. Commissioned by the New England Company, John Eliot received funds to translate the English Bible into the language of Algonquian.
Well, as you can see, the Bible was a tool used against the natives, which were the Hebrew descendants. The most effective way to reach Native Americans.
This is one of the heaviest books in the collection. It is a first edition King James Bible. And when I think old Bibles, that is exactly what I'm thinking that it looks like. Look at that. This book does not disappoint when you open it. Look at that. Over 400 years old. Look at that. 1611, first edition King James Bible. But did you know before King James got involved in the printing of this Bible, he was fascinated or tortured or bothered by witches. So what does he do? He writes a book on demonology and witchcraft. And about 14 years earlier, there's the third book of demonology. There are 3 books of demonology in here. The second book of demonology, a description of sorcery and witchcraft by none other than King James, as in the King James Bible.
We people who are darker than blue, are we gonna stand around this town and let what others say come true? We're just good for nothing, they all figure. A boyish grown-up shiftless jigger. Now we can't hardly stand for that. Or is that really where it's at? We people who are darker than blue, this ain't no time for segregating. I'm talking about brown and yellow too. Hi, yellow girl, can you tell? You're just the surface of our dark, deep well. If your mind could really see, you know your color is same as me. Pardon me, brother, as you stand in your glory. I know you won't mind if I tell the whole story.
So-called Negroes, you'll find our people at all complexions running around here bragging about I'm a black man. Well, this shows you that a new teaching is taking place and that there is new thinking among the so-called Negroes. If just yesterday you would have to admit that it was very difficult to get our people to refer to themselves as black, and then now all of a sudden you find all of us of all complexions not apologizing for being black, but bragging about being black.
It was a stone groove, my man. You are the most righteous. Yeah, right. Just get the fuck out.
Would ever have another Malcolm X? Because what the hell did you do with the first one? You let the first one be killed right in front of your eyes. Yes. Do you deserve a Malcolm?